Find me on Facebook under Ethical Preparedness page. Just use the terms Ethical Preparedness page in Facebook's search box. Wrong is wrong, even if everyone is doing it. Right is right, even if nobody is doing it. As a law enforcement officer, I've done hundreds of search warrants. So today I'm going to tell you how search warrants legally work and how you can use this knowledge to fight back if you become a victim of an illegal search and seizure from the government. And this will be right after the channel intro. Remember, you are ultimately responsible for protecting yourself and for providing for yourself. Live your life with honor and integrity, and always be the wolf hunter. Don't be the sheep, and never be the wolf. Okay, for a little back history, our forefathers, when they were forming our new government, they had had enough of the tyranny of the British government and their trampling of the people's rights, the rights that our forefathers believed that people naturally had. And one of those rights that they recognized was written into the Fourth Amendment, which states that people have the right to be safe and secure from unreasonable searches and seizures. Now, I would argue that the Fourth Amendment is one of the most important for law enforcement because it dictates how we stop criminals and seize evidence, and this is stuff that law enforcement usually does on a daily basis. And the courts have also ruled that the only way that a cop can seize contraband or property from somebody without a search warrant would be if that cop sees it in plain view, or the evidence would be lost if the cop doesn't seize it right then and there. For instance, underneath the Carroll Doctrine, if a cop stops a car and sees digital scales and small plastic baggies filled with suspected narcotics, all of it in plain sight, then the courts have ruled that since the car is on the roadway and since cars have a motor and wheels, that if the cop runs to go get the search warrant, then that car and the evidence will be gone by the time that the cop gets back to the scene with that search warrant. So therefore, it's not an unreasonable seizure for the cop to go ahead and seize that contraband right then and there before the car has a chance to be driven off with the evidence. Now, each state may be different, but in my state, the courts have generally ruled that unless it's either an emergency or exigent circumstance, that we can't conduct searches and seizures unless we get a search warrant. Now, I should also point out that there are usually a few, usually recognized exceptions to the search warrant rule. A search incident to arrest is usually one of those exceptions to the search warrant rule. A search incident to arrest is when cops arrest somebody, so they're going to search that person before that person gets put into jail. And this is usually just done to ensure that contraband and weapons don't get brought into the jail. The Terry Frisk is another exception. This is from Terry versus Ohio, where the Supreme Court ruled that if a cop can articulate that a person may be armed, and if that cop is legally detaining that person, then that cop can do a quick pat down of that person's outer clothing to check for weapons. And this court case could actually be a whole different video on its own. And another common exception is the vehicle inventory prior to tow. And this falls under the court case South Dakota versus Opperman. And this is an exception for when the cop arrests a driver of a car and is then going to subsequently tow the driver's car. The cop is expected to inventory the contents of that vehicle prior to it being towed away. And then another common exception to the search warrant rule is when a person gives consent for law enforcement to do that search. And this could also be another whole different video because of all the legal aspects surrounding it. Anyways, back to how search warrants work. The Fourth Amendment says that people are to be protected against unreasonable searches and seizures, and on probable cause, and supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the places to be searched and also particularly describing the persons or things to be seized. Now, I've done hundreds of search warrants now in my career, between search warrants on homes and apartments and also search warrants for historic cell phone records and email records. I've just done lots of them. But here's the thing that many people don't realize, that while I, as a detective, have done many search warrants, the average beat cop in larger cities have not done them. And that's because many regular beat cops don't know the process of getting a search warrant. Therefore, many will shy away from doing them. For me to get a search warrant, I had to follow certain steps that were spelled out under the Fourth Amendment. Let's say I wanted to search a suspected child molester's cell phone for images of child porn on it. In order for me to get a search warrant for that cell phone, first I would have to type up the actual search warrant itself, which particularly describes the cell phone that I wanted to search and the evidence that I'm looking for on it. Now, most counties have a standard search warrant template that they want filled out, and these aren't always the easiest things to fill out. So again, on the search warrant template, I have to describe the cell phone that I wanted to search. So for example, I would describe it as a one black Samsung Galaxy cellular phone with the serial number of 123456 on the back of the phone. Now, if I were wanting to search a house, I'd have to particularly describe that house I wanted to search. For example, I would say, this home is a white in color, one-story single-family dwelling home located at 1234 Anywhere Street with the numerals of 1234 affixed to the right side of the front door. So anyways, after I particularly describe the suspect's phone I wanted to search, then I have to describe what evidence I'm looking for. In this example, I'd be looking for the photos and anything to prove that the phone belonged to the suspect. And then after that, then on a separate probable cause affidavit, I then have to articulate why I believed this guy was a child molester, and why I believe that he will have child pornography, and why I believe that child pornography will be on that particular cell phone instead of somebody else's phone or someplace else. So for example, I would say, this detective has reason to believe that this man is suspected of molesting a child and taking photographs of the act with his cellular phone because his wife advised me that she went to use his phone and found photos of him committing sex acts with their 5-year-old daughter on the phone. But if I can't satisfy all three of those, of why I believe he's a suspect, of why I believe there's evidence, and why that evidence will be found on that particular phone, then most judges won't sign off on that search warrant because my attempt at a search warrant wouldn't satisfy the Fourth Amendment requirements. So then if I went ahead and searched that phone anyways without a signed search warrant, then any evidence I found would get thrown out in court, and then I would really open myself up to a lawsuit from that child molester for violating his constitutional right against unreasonable searches and seizure. Okay, so let's say I've now typed up the actual search warrant, and then I typed up the probable cause affidavit spelling out why I believe this guy was a suspect, and why I believe there was evidence of child porn on his phone, and I particularly described that phone. Now I have to get it signed, and then I have to take it to my prosecutor's office for review. Now, the laws don't say anything about us cops actually having to take their search warrants to the prosecutor's office first, so legally a cop can take a search warrant straight to a judge. But most prosecutors or district attorney's offices will want you to bring it to them first because it's going to be their office that's going to have to defend that search warrant in court should it go to trial. Okay, so now let's say that the prosecutor's office found that the search warrant passes their legal muster and they sign off on it. Now I have to take it to a judge and get sworn in under oath. And then once the judge swears me in, then the judge reads and reviews the search warrant to make sure it would be a reasonable search also. So then once the judge reads it and finds it legal and reasonable, and then he signs off on it, then copies of it still has to be made because the search warrant and anything seized under that search warrant will become public knowledge within a few days. And many people don't realize this. Most counties have a central place that you can go to and ask to see all of the search warrants that were served. In my county, it's the county's clerk's office. And these public records will usually show the address that was searched and exactly what was seized during that search. Now, with special circumstances, you can sometimes get these search warrants sealed, which means that they're kept under wraps, but explaining that would be a whole separate video. So now you've typed up the search warrant and also typed up the probable cause affidavit. And then you took it to your prosecutor's office and they signed it, and then you took it to a judge who signed it also. Now you have to make a copy of it that you have to leave with the person whose house or phone or whatever you searched. And then once you've served it and seized evidence and left a copy of the warrant with the suspect, now you have to do what they call a search warrant return, where you return the search warrant to the judge who signed off on it, and on that search warrant you detail everything that you took from that house or found on that phone, etc. So for the regular beat cop, there's a lot of unfamiliar steps for them, and many times it will intimidate them just enough into saying screw it and just not mess with it. Now, if it's a small crime like drug possession, the beat cop may go ahead and seize that evidence and hope he can get around the search warrant mandate under something like the Carroll Doctrine or the Supreme Court case Arizona versus Gant or something like that. But for larger crimes like child porn or major drug dealing or rape or something where the suspect is facing many years in prison, many times the regular big city beat cop will usually call a detective to come and actually do the search warrant so there's no risk of losing the evidence. They'll do this because they don't want to risk a warrantless search being successfully argued by a defense attorney that no exigent circumstances existed. Therefore, a search warrant should have been obtained before doing the search and seizure, so therefore any evidence that was found needs to be thrown out in court. Now, a lot of people like to make fun of small town cops, but I have to give this to them. While the average big city cop doesn't know how to do a search warrant and has to call a detective in to do it, that small town cop usually doesn't have the luxury of calling in a detective. He has to know how to do this himself. So again, if no exigent circumstances exist, meaning that if the cop doesn't act immediately, then evidence is going to be lost, or if the incident doesn't fall under one of the search warrant exceptions like search incident to arrest or vehicle inventory prior to tow or a Terry frisk, then law enforcement must get a search warrant in order to search your house or your property or your cell phone or your computer, etc. Now, the feds seem to be able to play by their own set of rules with their blanket search warrant allowing for the seizure of mass phone records, and I've heard that if you're within so many miles of the border they can automatically stop you and stuff like that. But that's a real point of contention with me that deserves its own separate video. But in this video, I'm talking about your regular local law enforcement who answers to elected judges in the counties that you live in. Now, as a law enforcement officer, as much as I love shaking down criminals and finding the evidence and getting them off of the street so they can't continue to prey on good people, I love the fact that we have the Constitution even more, as it helps to keep the government in check. It helps to keep good people from being subjected to searches for no reason. And when the government does shake down innocent people, it at least gives the person a fighting chance and allows that person to sue the cop and his police agency for violating their rights. Now, does this sometimes still get abused? I'm sure it does, but at least it gives us pretty good protections. As a 15 or 16 year career cop now, I took an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States on the day that I graduated the police academy. And I took that oath with pride and I took it seriously. I only want to get the criminals, the evil people who commit crimes against good people. And I will never take part of a warrantless search unless there's exigency or an emergency. Now, the reason that I'm telling you all of this is because you good people who watch my videos should know your rights and how to keep the government in check, which was what our forefathers had in mind, especially since they don't seem to be teaching this stuff in schools anymore. So if you ever find yourself when you're truly doing nothing wrong, when you're committing no crimes, but when you suddenly find yourself getting stopped and searched by the cops, or the cops are ransacking your house, all without a search warrant and without your consent, I want you all to know how our Fourth Amendment spells out what's required for search warrants and how our courts have ruled on how searches can be done without a search warrant. And I want you to know that if you found yourself to be the victim of an unreasonable and warrantless search and seizure, that you can sue that cop and his police agency for violating your rights underneath the Fourth Amendment. Now, however, if you're a criminal and you find yourself being searched by the cops, I'm sorry about your luck. You just better hope that you get a great defense attorney. But personally, I hope that that search is legal and that you get held responsible for whatever crimes that you're committing against good people. Folks, if you like this video, please give it the thumbs up and comment below with your thoughts. And if you think others will find this video to be useful also, then please share this video on Facebook or whatever your favorite social media is. And if you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to this channel, as I'll be doing many more videos down the road as time permits. Anyways, folks, if you made it this far, thank you very much for watching, and I pray that you have a good night.